Hi everybody, welcome to the Lord of the Reads. So in today's video, we're going to be going over my February wrap-up. Last month, for January, I only went over the books that I did for my TBR game. However, this month, and from now on, I'm going to start doing all the books that I read in that month, no matter what the reason was. So there will be more books on this wrap-up than there were last month. So we can go ahead and get started with the first book, which is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. None of these books are in any particular order, just the order that they are stacked up beside me. So first, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This was a reread. This is one of my favorite classics. It's amazing. It follows Victor Frankenstein, who is a scientist, and he wants to create life. So he builds a human and brings it to life. It's a very interesting concept, and the book is spectacular. Definitely one of my favorite classics, and I knew I would like it because it was a reread. But I read this one for Polarthon, and I wasn't quite sure I was going to be able to get through it in the week, because, I mean, it's a classic. It's also a bit of a denser classic, but it was still very good, and I finished it in the week, so that's good. So this one was definitely a fun one. The next book on this list is Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. I had to read this one for school. This was not a reread. I've never read this one before. I read Tom Sawyer, and I wanted to get to Huck Finn eventually, but I finally read it, and it was amazing. So it follows Huck Finn, and this happens after Tom Sawyer, so I can't say too much without spoiling that, but what happened at the end of Tom Sawyer, if you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. That's put him in a very good spot. However, his father, that hasn't been around for a while, comes back and wants what he got in the end of Tom Sawyer. Very vague. That's really all I can say. And based on that, he takes a journey, a very long journey. I love this book. This was better than Tom Sawyer, and I really liked Tom Sawyer. This one was much better. There was so much more adventure and travel and fun, sarcastic, ironic situations and characters. It was so much fun. And this was definitely one that I will reread eventually because it was really good. The next book that I read in February was The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This is another classic that I wanted to get to eventually, and I had to read for school, so another one on this list. I wasn't expecting to like this one as much as I did. It is a contemporary romance, kind of, set in the 1920s, so I wasn't quite sure what I would think, because I don't usually read contemporary. But it was really good. It's about Jay Gatsby, who's rich, and he falls in love with this woman who is already married, and it's a whole ordeal after that. But based on that, I wasn't quite sure how I'd like it, but it was a lot better than I expected. I listened to it on audiobooks, I read along, so it was definitely, I think the reading along with the audiobook definitely helped. Otherwise, it would have been a bit slower. But besides the pace, it was really good. It was interesting. The characters were all super well developed. A lot of drama, and obviously, based on the synopsis, lots of things happened that helped push the plot along. So, definitely a good one, and one that I will probably reread. The next book on this list is The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. I've seen the movie for this, and to be honest, I can't remember whether I've already read this or not, but this is another one that I had to read for school, and one that I read for Polarthon. Can't remember if I've already read it, but I read it in February, and it was good. It was probably the slowest book on this list. It was action. Like, there was a lot of action. However, it was much slower for some reason. And I don't know why. Because this had, like, The Great Gatsby was faster than this. However, it had less action. So I'm not really sure why that was. But this one was just slower for me. But besides that, like, the plot is super interesting. It's about a man, and he's a fisherman, and he hasn't caught anything. And he goes out one morning to try to catch fish, and gets pulled out to sea. And it's definitely an interesting plot, just a bit slower than what I'm used to reading. But it's like, it's super short. Like 100-some pages. Like, it's short. So it didn't take me a while. It was just slower than the other books. But it was a good one. Not my favorite on this list, but it was definitely a good book that I enjoyed enough to probably reread. So that's how you know it's a success. It's worth rereading. And I think if I do, I'll find more stuff in it, which might help me like it more. So, I'd say it was a success. The next book is Relentless by Tim S. Grover. This was my nonfiction pick for February. And this book is about how to be successful based on how you face problems and challenging situations and how you deal with stress and that kind of stuff. So, not much to say about plot or characters, but definitely a motivational book, an intriguing book as far as the ideas and the concepts and the applications and all that. It's definitely very interesting and is a good representation of what it says it was. So, as far as that goes, it does take it from a bit of a sports perspective, because the author, Tim S. Grover, was, I want to say, athletic coach, but it's not really that. But he trained, like, really big athletes. So, I mean, I didn't really relate to that part. But, in general, the concepts and the ideas were very interesting and applicable to all aspects of life. So, definitely an interesting book and a lot packed into this book. So, a good one in that respect. Next is The Girl Who Speaks Spirit by Sophie Anderson. This was a book that I read for Polarthon. I think this was the first book I read for Polarthon. It was amazing. It's about this girl who is bigger than all the other children in her village. She's taller than all of them, and everyone makes fun of her because of it. And one day she wakes up with bear's legs and goes on this adventure to figure out where they came from and why she has them. Definitely a fun book. It's a middle grade, but it's a lot got put into this book, like, as far as characterization and, you know, fleshing out the plot and all that. Like, there's so much packed into this book that made it so good. So many lessons you can take out of this, like, all kinds of things. One of my favorite books that I read in February was spectacular. This is the first book I read by Sophie Anderson. It was amazing. I'd heard so many good things about her writing. The writing was another thing in this book that was spectacular. So, I will be picking up more from her in the future. So, yes, spectacular. I loved it. This is a book that I would reread, and a book that I would read more from by this author, so a success. Next is The House with Chicken Legs by Sophie Anderson. You weren't getting away from Sophie Anderson this easy. Second book I read by Sophie Anderson. I think there's 3 that are, like, set in this world. They're not really in a series, but, like, set in this world. This book was so good. I like this one better than The Girl Who Speaks Bear. It follows a different girl than the girl who speaks bear, but this girl lives in a Yaga's house, and the house has chicken legs, and it walks around, and her grandmother's job is to pretty much guide the dead to the gate, and the gate will take them to the world of the dead, where they can be at peace. And her grandmother wants her to become the next Yaga, but she doesn't want to. So there's a lot of talk of her wanting to change her destiny and whether destiny is a fixed thing or not. And this was one of those books that at times was really frustrating to read, because this is like a common problem in writing, especially with middle grade and for books with younger characters, is that they'll make all these decisions that the reader can tell is wrong, and it's just frustrating to see them make the same bad decision over and over and over again. So, definitely a common problem, or not really a problem, just a common thing that happens in writing that was in this, which made it slightly frustrating, but helped the story in some ways. So, one of those things where the character does all kinds of bad things, and she's not quite a morally gray character, just she makes mistakes, and she makes them over and over and over and over again, many times, which can be frustrating, but it helped the story along in this case, which is very good. So definitely a really good book that I would recommend. And the last book that I read in February, definitely my favorite book that I read in February. It takes the cake as being spectacular, and that is The Tower of Nero by Rick Riordan. This is the last book in the Trials of Apollo series, which most series I will read, like, where all the books have already been published, so I'm not waiting for books. This was the first series that I ever read where I was waiting for the books to come out. Like, I think I had to wait for a year, because I picked up the fourth book as soon as it came out, and then it was another year before this one came out. So, I had to wait for this one. And the apprehension, or not the apprehension, but the anticipation was just about killing me. And as soon as I picked this book up, I knew I was going to love it. I love Rick Riordan's writing. Everything that he has written, that I've read at least, has been spectacular. So good. This series is about Apollo, who, because of something that he did wrong in a previous series, he is now being punished for it, and has been stripped of all his godlyhood, and now walks around as immortal until he can complete these challenges and return to the gods and become a god again. And my favorite part of this book was just seeing the change in social class. I mean, it's kind of a change in social class. He's a god and he becomes immortal. That's practically the same thing. I loved it. I love it in books where either someone who's of a low social class has to interact with a higher social class, or vice versa. Higher social class has to interact with a lower social class. And this was done amazing. Like, the fantasy and the mythology. I love Greek mythology and really any mythology, so Rick Riordan's definitely one of my favorites, and this book has been my favorite thing that he's written so far. It's spectacular. My favorite book in the series, and as far as all the other series, my favorite out of that too, so I would definitely recommend this one. I can't recommend it enough. It's so amazing. So those were all the books that I read in February. I hope you enjoyed. I loved February. I don't think there was a book in February that I didn't like, so that's always a good thing. But I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and comment down below what you thought of the books you read in February. And with that, I'll see you in my next video. Bye!